What is a motion? What's the point of it?
On the surface, it sounds like it's a reasonable thing to do.
Now, how do we know what Singaporeans want?
When the motion was brought up in the news, I think quite a lot of the conversation online was that rent is like the bulk of the cost. Is this the case?
The hawker center starts to become vacant.
But isn't that an association problem? Like, can't you fix it? Okay, we're kickstarting a new series leading up to the upcoming election on cost of living. And today, inspired by the new amended motion for hawkers, we'll be talking about the rising food prices in hawker centres. So following a 5-hour debate in Parliament, help me understand this, right? Hawkers need support to lower their cost of operations. Singaporeans are in support of hawker food to remain cheap, fast good. The government is also supportive of hawkers to thrive and for Singaporeans to have access to affordable, delicious food.
Same side.
So then what's the problem? Why are hawkers still facing policy difficulties? What are we missing here? In this episode, we invited a young hawker and someone from the government to help us figure this out. A big welcome to our guest, a second-gen hawker and president of Chinatown Complex Hawkers Association, Cornelius Tan, and Senior Minister of State, Dr. Koh Poh Koon. Welcome.
Welcome, guys.
So Cornelius used to be a telecommunications engineer.
Yes, that's right.
He left his job to be a penguin dad.
Hey,
Yes.
like
He's
stay home dad.
Stay home dad for a
I
year before joining his parents' hawker stall that specializes in crispy cuttlefish and ear biscuits, which I love.
Very nice.
The thing about ear biscuits, right? You gotta keep chewing, correct? Is that a thing? That's what my dad told me. Just you keep chewing, like because when you first eat,
is
it
the
feels
texture.
tasteless.
Yes.
Then when you keep chewing and chewing, right? It's what
The flavor just bursts in the mouth.
So that was my problem.
Anyway, I digress. And early this year, Cornelius was appointed to be the president of Chinatown Complex Hawkers Association.
Mr. President, thank you for joining us.
Alright, so before we begin, right, I want to ask the both of y'all, why do y'all both feel strongly for Singapore's hawker culture, and what your individual reasons are from your position?
So hawker is deeply in all of us. So every day we must at least visit hawker center once to tapao back home to eat, right? From young, I grew up around hawker centers. And then I was brought up by my grandparents. And then especially when my parents are working, those memories are actually lingered together with this cuttlefish. And especially when they are no longer around, then of course it is something that I want to carry on as legacy.
Right.
The way how I live my life as a Singaporean from young, as a child until today, it hasn't changed. I'm here to hope that this culture will stay this way, to preserve and protect the culture.
Right. And Dr. Koh, like, why is hawker centers important to Singapore to begin with? We have restaurants, a higher tier. Then on a lower budget, we have coffee shops, we have food courts, right? Why are hawker centers different?
I think because the hawker culture is so much a part of our national identity. Just ask any Singaporean who's gone overseas for any small period of time. The moment you go onto the plane and on the way back, you'll be thinking about, what should I eat when I first get back to Singapore? Is it my fishball noodle, my mee pok otak, or my nasi lemak? That kind of hawker food, to many of us, is a memory of home.
Right.
It's also, to some extent, our comfort food. It's something that I think is quite unique for us as Singaporeans. So much so that it's now part of the UNESCO Intangible Heritage.
Yeah, how did we get there?
Well,
Everywhere have, but how did we get it?
Now you think about it, what is so special about the hawker center and the culture we have that is not present anywhere else?
Okay.
Right? So you don't see, say, for example, a food court in Australia or America being inscribed in UNESCO Intangible Heritage.
Yeah.
What is the difference between a food court and a hawker center we have in Singapore? I think that is the key crux of the question.
Right. What is the difference?
Well, how do you think about a hawker center? I mean, in your mind.
So just now Dan was asking me. Then I'm very confident because I thought I know the answer. I live here all my life, right?
A coffee shop and a food and a hawker center.
I didn't articulate it.
Yeah.
But in my head, I was going to tell you, dude, hawker center is the one where it's a big place, then got small shops.
Isn't that a food court?
There's also a coffee shop, there's also a food court.
The difference between a food court, in my mind, and a hawker center. First of all, most hawker centers generally are not air conditioned. It is also quite an informal place where people from all walks of life, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're Chinese, Malay, Indians, or otherwise, you can actually all gather at the same place and enjoy affordable, good quality food. And in a very informal setting. You can describe it as like a dining room for the community. Everybody is a place where we interact and socialize.
Right.
Right? So that's one very distinctive feature. It's so much a part of our community identity. The second thing, of course, I think is important for us to realize is that the hawker culture is alive because of hawkers.
Yep.
Not because there's a place called a hawker center. It is the people running the stores every day that made it come to life. Over time, you form a relationship with that particular hawker.
Yep.
Like, like the 老顾客, old customer, right?
Yep.
Sometimes you patronize that store so much that the hawkers will remember what's your favorite. You go there, look at your face, 小弟, you want this again? They know exactly what you like.
Yeah.
So there's a relationship.
Right.
And that is quite unique as well. Very
But
few.
to be fair, you can have that in food court also.
True,
Like
but,
my
but
downstairs
food court, the difference is that it can sometimes be run by more like employees and workers. In fact,
Right.
food courts, quite a number of stores can become part of a franchise or a chain. But in hawker centers, each and every store,
Right.
mostly, I wouldn't say all, but mostly the stores are run by the hawkers themselves because they have their own unique recipe. They have their special way of cooking or frying something.
Right.
No two char kway teow are alike in different hawker centers.
Right.
They all are called char kway teow, but they all taste different.
Right.
Right? So there are some unique
Wait, sorry,
differences.
this is a rule in hawker centers.
It's not a rule, but that's the nature and that's the character of a hawker center.
Right.
And how do you then want to preserve this? Otherwise, if the hawker center starts to look and feel exactly like a food court run by franchises,
Right.
where there is it's more of a business rather than there's personal relationship
Yeah.
between a hawker and the resident that stay around the area, where each recipe for each store, even though it's called chicken rice or called char kway teow, it actually can taste different from store to store.
Right. So I think like something about hawker centers, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the store has to be owned by a Singaporean or a PR, whereas that's not the same for food courts, right?
Yeah, and that's intentional because we want to preserve that uniqueness, the individuality of each store
Right.
you don't
Okay,
know that.
okay. Yeah.
So you must be a Singaporean to.
or PR.
I see.
Oh.
But doesn't that give hawker centers and food court an unfair advantage because they can hire work permit workers?
Well, in some ways, it's you want to preserve that uniqueness. That means, first of all, you need to be a low barrier entry so that Singaporeans will prepare to step into it. They don't need to face too much hurdles. They can actually enter the hawker trade easily. And secondly, because we say that you should only be a Singaporean or PR, that understands our local culture, our local tastes and flavors better to run it. So it also then retains the individuality and uniqueness. And in fact, many of them pass their recipe from generation to generation.
Right.
So there's that uniqueness of each and every store.
Right.
Right? So that's the kind of culture we want to preserve. So if you have traveled to overseas food courts, I remember when I traveled for medical conferences in America previously, you find that after a few days you crave for Chinese food, you go to this chain of Chinese store called Panda Express.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been to a Panda Express,
One time.
do you see the people cooking the chow mein?
Chow mein.
Chow mein, you know?
Chow mein.
And most of them are not even Asians.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a question of whether you want a hawker culture to retain the authenticity,
Yeah.
or do you want it to become just another production system
Right.
run by generic workers
Right.
with no unique recipe?
So I'm hoping you can share with us the ins and outs, the challenges of running a hawker stall that we don't see. I mean, besides having to wake up early.
When I transited from corporate world into hawker, there was a huge culture shock from nice aircon environment, and then going to hawker, then it's like perspiry, and then everything I have to do myself.
Right.
So that is when I started to realize that resilience and adaptability, these two characteristics, is very important for hawkers because we need to be very versatile to changes. And
What are
then,
the changes?
For my case, when the machine breaks down, I have to quickly troubleshoot and get it up running
Right.
because my staffs are waiting for me. So I do not engage a third party to repair the machine.
You have to fix it yourself.
Yeah, I fix it myself. I'm an engineer and I can do it. And this is how I save costs.
Okay.
Yeah, so immediately on the spot, I troubleshoot and I get it done.
Right.
So by right, half an hour, everything must be sweet done up already.
Right.
So this is what I face daily in my hawker life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Over the years, what I observe is that raw material prices are increasing. Inflation is a global trend. We cannot
Right.
run away. So on top of that, handling fees as well, transportation, warehousing, all this requires
Right.
money.
You
And
pay that separately. You don't call a vendor and say, give me cuttlefish.
no, I have my cold store, my cuttlefish are sitting in the cold store. So year after year, I have to recontract my tenancy with them as well. Contract. Yeah.
Also,
Yeah,
you're paying
exactly.
rentals in a few places.
Yeah, I mean, yes. But
Okay.
in a nutshell, yes.
Okay, how about the margin?
The margin in hawker center level is pretty honest living. So it's not like very good, but it's okay. Yeah, speaking for everybody, it's about 30%.
For $1, your margins are about 30 cents.
Yes, that's right.
Sorry, and the 70 cents is the cost of food or cost of food
Everything.
plus rent plus storage
Everything.
plus everything?
Everything really. So at the end of the day, if hawkers are left with 30%,
Net
we are-
profit. That's pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So that's the reason why a lot of hawkers are able to stay on for generations, 40 years in Chinatown Complex, 1983 until today.
Yeah.
Right.
They're able to have a roof over their head.
Yeah.
They are able to send their children into universities. And today, they're happily active aging in the hawker.
Yeah.
So hawker is a way of life. Hawker trade is a way of life. It's how Singaporeans live. It's not just business.
Right.
And I have to add that hawker has a lot of misidentity because people mistaken hawkers to be coffee shop owners.
What's wrong with that?
We are significantly different. Firstly, we are not required to have an akra our business registration to operate in an NEA hawker center. Just individual name, we bid for a store and then we get the license.
Right.
We must have the hygiene cert and then after that we can operate our store. And the NEA manager will meet us on the ground.
Right.
To assist
Does
with
anyone taste your food and be like, oh no, it's too shit, cannot?
No, anybody. Anybody can come into the scene, you see.
No.
Sincerely. No
one grades your food before you're like,
No,
you know
no,
what,
no.
Cornelius, take a seat.
Now imagine, John, you want to become a hawker, you go to NEA, you bid for a store, come to Chinatown Complex.
Yeah.
Our rentals are about 800 plus, okay? Just
Right.
come. So you bid somewhere around 800 plus.
Your food fall also crazy, by the way.
Yeah, very crazy. And then after that, you can almost start your store. After you take your 1 day course with
Food hygiene
yeah,
cost.
skills future credit, government pay for it. And then after that,
essentially free.
Oh, okay,
you're
wait, hold
qualified.
on. Hey, realistically,
Yeah,
I
this
feel
is
like you're
realistic.
selling me to be a hawker. I don't know why.
Okay, I am.
Realistically, right? Let's say I really discover a recipe that I think super dope, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so I go to, for example, NEA's website,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
and then
that's right.
there's a button there to apply to be a hawker. I
Yes.
submit a form.
Yes.
Then I wait. Is it? How long is
You
that?
put in a bid lah.
Yeah.
So there must
Oh,
be a,
straight up we are
there
bidding
must be
already,
a
ah.
bidding exercise, right? So
Okay.
usually we know where the empty stores are. So we will say on whether it's every month or every 2 months when there's a certain number of stores available.
Right.
NEA will put on website and say this tender exercise for this month, there are these locations that you can bid for lah. Then you
Right.
put your bid in lah.
And when you're bidding for the monthly rent or you're bidding for...
Yes, monthly rent.
So,
Okay.
so
Yes.
if your bid
Understand.
is a successful bid, that means you are the so-called highest bidder for this exercise, for
Yeah.
example, for that store.
Yeah.
Then that determines your rent for the next 3 years of tenancy term lah.
So as Cornelius mentioned, so like the rent is about 800. So then if everybody's bidding 800, then someone bids
No. So
850.
800 is, say for example, if you put in 800 and you happen to be the highest bid, then you get the store for $800 lah.
Okay, but someone can spot market and put 1,500 lah, and then
Sure,
get it.
but the person who put in the bid needs to then have a sense of what is the market competition in the
Yeah.
area, number
Right.
one. Number two, you also must decide what
Of
product
course.
you're selling, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
So if you put in a bid of 1,500 and you must go on the pretext that I will get the bid at 1,500, then
Yeah.
that becomes my cost 1,500
Yeah.
per month for the next
And
3
lock in
years.
for 3 years.
How can I then price my goods and make it work? So you have to have some prior calculation in your head.
Right.
Okay, so since we're on the topic, right, and you mentioned about margins earlier, I think like when the motion was brought up in the news, I think quite a lot of the conversation online was that rent is like the bulk of the cost. Is this the case in terms of that 70%?
From what I observe, no. Not for Chinatown Complex. Raw material is the main cost.
Ingredients lah for
Yes,
food lah. I see.
ingredients. Because that is the main ingredients we need to cook every day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are necessary, those are needs. So as we purchase those ingredients to cook, those are our main bulk of our monthly expenses.
Okay,
So
Right.
it's not the rent. And if it's a Zhicha store or something like that, it's going to be a lot more.
Oh yeah, Zhicha store very tough for.
That's right.
So that's why the business strategy is important.
Yes.
Yeah.
What you want to sell, you therefore know what is the kind of cost you have to bear. And so when you bid, you must bid realistically. lah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I bid for that store for $1, and then if I decide to keep renewing, like I can
So
keep
for
it
the
at-
next 3 years, your rent for that one term will be $1 lah per month.
Yeah, so let's say I $1 per month, right? Then I make a sick goreng pisang store, right? And now I've established a reputation already. So on my 4th year, I need to go and bid to retain my rent, right?
No need to bid again.
Oh, then?
So once you enter, because you see, we also need to provide
Stability
assurance to the
lah.
hawker
Yeah,
that
yeah.
your business can continue without suddenly must go and rebid. Then if next year you don't get the bid, how? Then you're not a shop. Cannot.
Because if I'm another goreng pisang shop, then I will
Of
just
course cannot.
charge you
Of course cannot.
25K.
So once you bid and you get in, let's say you bid $1, you got in. At the end of the 3 years, on the 4th year, you are invited to renew your tenancy. So we have a system to say whatever rent you come in, if you below the average assessed market rent, we will gradually increase it closer towards the average market rent.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
The increase cannot be more than $300 per tenancy term. So
Which is
we
3 years
we
again.
slowly increase bit
Which
by
is
bit.
$301 lah.
So it cannot be more than 300. So that means at most $301 for the next 3 years.
Interesting.
Then if you goreng pisang still sell very well,
Yeah.
from the year 7 to year 10 or year 7 to year 9, the next 3 year, the third 3 year term, you maybe add
601
another
lah.
$600. So you $601 lah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it'll take you many tenancy terms before you even get to the
Yeah.
average assessed market rent of $1,250.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So
okay,
how did this
understand.
misconception of rent is a problem come from? So for example, in comparison, this office rental is $10 over $1,000, right? Can you do something about it also?
Unfortunately for you, NEA don't run office
I
buildings.
see. We need to get NEA involved. You plant some mosquitoes here so that they come.
John, Be a hawker.
So based on what Cornelius was sharing earlier, I mean, from his perspective, his rent is $800 and his biggest cost factor is probably from the raw materials.
Yeah.
Right. And then, so NEA, we do our so-called survey of all the hawkers as well. And actually from our survey, generally, if you take all the hawkers together, the survey shows that less than 10% of their actual cost is attributable to rent, between 8 to 9% thereabout.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, I would think so. Like,
Then from the raw
$500.
material cost,
Yeah.
I mean, it's about between 56, 57% there. So about 60% if you
Yeah.
average it out, right? And about 20% is for their manpower cost, whether
Yeah.
they hire a store assistant or what they pay themselves. Right? So actually, if you think about it, just raw material, 57%, 60%, labor cost, 20%, that's about almost 70% of the main cost. So rental is
Right.
10% or less. In other words, even if your rent is zero, if there's no footfall, there's no business on your raw material you buy already will go rotten. It's a dead loss straight away. So actually what hawkers need is actually support and footfall. People to come and patronize, not just making the rent as low as possible. It helps to save them a bit of margin. But even if he's $800 less rental a month, give him zero rent, he at best save $800. But if people don't come and buy his product, he has no income.
Yeah.
It just means he has less cost, but he has no upside, no income.
So what we're really saying is that changing the rental prices really won't solve any of the problems.
It will help to make it less pressure for them, but by itself, because it's only less than 10% of the cost, what they need is actually a lot more footfall and top line.
I hear there are some hawker centers that have weird contractual obligations. For example, you have to open 7 days. You have to start at like 6 a.m. or something.
So
like
those
that.
are what we call a socially conscious enterprise hawker center. It's a newer model of running a hawker center because there are two different types of hawker centers. One type is the own self bid, own self run.
Okay.
Right? So that's the typical one that we are all aware of. Then the later hawker centers that we started opening, about 14 of them, NEA will appoint an operator.
Okay.
Then the operator will assign the stores to certain hawkers. So these are the socially conscious enterprise hawker centers.
Socially conscious to whom?
Socially conscious because they are trying to strike a balance between what the hawkers need to be conducive to run the business and what the community needs in terms of providing service to the community. So for example, you go back maybe in the early 2000s or 2011 there, about 2010 there, about so 10 over years ago. As some hawker centers starts to age, then some hawkers find that if the rent also is quite affordable, they may not want to run 14 hours a day. So some of them find that they open only for peak hours, right? But if you're the consumer, you'll say, how come you only open for breakfast? Then but when I come for dinner and lunch, 9 out of 10 stores all close early already.
Yeah.
There are two problems here. One is that as a community dining hall that serves the needs of the community feels underserved. They feel that this hawker center, most of the stores don't open for dinner. Then they cannot tapao, cannot eat, right? Then for the few hawkers in the hawker center who wants to open later, they find that actually if most of the stores don't open, customers therefore don't come.
Yeah.
They open later also, they can't get the footfall they need. So it's bad for the hawkers who wants to run regular hours. It's bad for community who wants to dine 2 or 3 meals a day.
Right.
So that's why when we end up looking at the socially conscious enterprise hawker center as a new model, we're trying to strike the needs of hawkers who wants to run certain hours to make a good living and the community who needs to actually be served. That's why when we run a socially conscious enterprise hawker center, there are some requirements for stores to open for a certain number of hours to meet the needs of the community.
Yeah.
But even then, there are some rules, guidelines for this. That means the hawkers running in these centers need not run for more than 5 days a week, and each day need not be more than 8 hours. So that we still want to make sure that they are working reasonable hours.
Right.
But if they so choose to run longer,
it's up to them.
I think it's their choice. But we want to make sure that there's a balance between their health, the needs of the community, and keeping the overall place vibrant so that all other stores can benefit from the draw of the footfall. So sometimes it's a bit of I would say it's a chicken and egg problem.
Right.
When the rent is expensive, people will feel they have to run longer to make ends meet. Then things will open for longer. But when we try and make rent affordable, because that's our intent to keep the barrier low, then once you recover costs after 2 hours, you say, hey, why I work so hard? I will also curtail my hours, right?
Sure.
Then if I curtail hours, then there's a knock-on effect. Community feel that how come this hawker center every dinner not open? So it's a tension there. It's a balance we have to strike.
I see. It's the first thing I thought when you told me rent 800.
Precisely. So it's a balance, you see.
Okay.
It's starting to sound, and like you mentioned earlier, so like the solution is that more people need to patronize hawker centers. But is there a mismatch in expectation? Because Singaporeans obviously want their wages to increase every single year, but we expect hawker centers to have $3 meals, $4 meals, and we don't want the prices of hawkers to go up. Isn't this the crux of the problem, that Singaporeans are not expecting prices to go up when they really should? Like, isn't this the crux of the problem?
To some extent it is. I'm sure the hawkers have a view. I mean, how do you all feel about your prices being so inelastic, cannot go up one, can only stay put?
Because I read like someone was just complaining like she increased like the price of her good by like 20 cents and everybody started complaining.
Ridiculous.
So actually hawkers, right, we have our community kind of spirit that we want to feed the community as well. So deservingly, honest living. And on our menu, of course, there's a wide spread of items on it with the more premium ones that will fetch probably a bigger profit out of it.
Yeah.
It's a very normal operating sales principle. Yep. So when we sell budget meals, we're also making a profit.
Okay.
Just that the profit is lower.
Yeah.
Right? You're still making a profit.
Sorry, the budget meals is of your own accord lah.
Yes.
No one
we
is
do.
actually saying you must do budget meals.
In fact, there are stores in Chinatown complex. They are selling $2-3 until today.
Yeah.
Prawn noodles, laksa still $2-3. And when people ask, how come you don't want to increase your prices? They say, my rent never increased. It has always been 300 plus because they are the first generation stores. Right. And now when I see my customers holding $2 on the hand, how can I increase another 20 cents, 30 cents?
Wow,
right?
so nice.
So, I mean, these are hawkers. These are local Singaporeans taking care of Singaporeans sincerely. Yeah. This is what we observe in a hawker center. Every store that you go, every local faces that you meet, every PR that you meet, they just want to cook like how they cook for their children for you. Because to them, when I'm here at the hawker center, what I enjoy doing is to cook and to see you smile after eating my food. Yeah. That's all. Hawkers are very simple.
Some of them very,
very simple. They don't even look at the dollar. They only look at the dollar at the end of the day. Hey, today got enough, tomorrow buy raw materials. Have. So they just take their cut and then the rest they can go and buy their raw materials for tomorrow or the next week.
Do people help them budget? Like, do you go and step in and help the older uncle, aunties?
They are very natural. They are CFO, they are CEO, they are CTOs.
Like I appreciate that sentiment. I think it's very beautiful, but to me it just screams unsustainable because like they also have to protect themselves. They also need to make enough money to make ends meet.
Their expectation for their way of living is not high. Okay. I mean, we have many kinds of hawkers from all walks of life. Of course. So when I'm sharing this case with you, it's a case whereby this hawker satisfied with what he's doing. He do volume. If I can sell 500 bowls a day, $2 or $3, to him it's okay. Yeah. So he will just continue selling in bulk. Yeah. So I don't care. You come, I give you more noodles, make sure that you're full. Yeah. By the end of the day, it has to taste good. It must be nutritious. And then you will naturally come back to me because you feel good after eating. Yeah. Right. So generally, even for other hawkers who don't have this model, you look at their menu and you will see there are cheaper items, there are more expensive items. Cheaper items are for need. I need to eat. I need to feed. Yep. And the more premium items are I want to have something better. Yeah, understand. I want.
Most stores
most stores are like that. Okay. So that's why you look at the menu. You can make your own decision with what you want to eat that day or what you want to bring home that day. So it's a free market that everybody can choose. Yeah. Yeah, and every item on it is profitable to the hawker. Okay. It's just the margin, whether it's higher or smaller.
So you brought up earlier about there's a first generation of hawkers.
Yes.
I mean I'm sure there's also a lot of kind-hearted new gen hawkers.
That's right.
But one of the OG hawkers, they are willing to do this, right?
Yes.
Where do we see in terms of trend and in policy perspective, right? Where do we see this trend going? I just came back from London. I acknowledge my privilege to be with there, right? And their market, you can order a normal anything, their basic food is $20, $30. Yeah. And I'm comparing advanced economy with advanced economy. For some reason, and I went to Iceland and then fish and chips was like $38. Something that we can get in Singapore for $17 and it's a nice air-conditioned cafe already. That one $38, you're standing. You are standing there to eat. So I'm trying to figure out, is it inevitable Singapore will get there?
So three of you have described a very interesting phenomena. I mean, you're all right to some extent.
Right? I don't want to be right.
You're right. You see, because what you have just described, John, is the fact that if the market is left on its own without, say, government intervention, then the competition and the way the businesses will have to price their product, not only to be competitive with their competitors, but also to price in the costs and also their margins, right? And so naturally, things will actually float to a certain level that the market can bear. It could be $38 in Finland, for example. And the description that Cornelius given, especially for the first generation hawkers, which it was a concessionary rate of rent that we give to them because they were the very first generation that we brought in from the streets into our hawker centers. Okay. So it was given as a concession. Wow. And so their rents are like very, very low because we want to take care of them. So all the new entrants then were to go through that bidding system we spoke about earlier. And Daniel was saying that sometimes, like just now I say, the way it's priced and the way it's done doesn't sound very sustainable. Yeah. But to some extent, what Cornelius is describing is that most hawkers, they actually have to price their product in a way that is what their customers can bear. So actually, it depends on where they operate. The hawkers are quite smart. They will know where their catchment, their clientele are, and generally they price it in a way that can actually satisfy the needs of their locality.
Like the CBD.
So that's actually market forces at work.
Okay.
So they have to look at the dishes they offer, the ingredients they use, the portions they serve, so that it's in a way that the clientele can actually afford and still meets their needs.
Right.
And that's how they can survive for a long time as well.
Right.
But the point that Daniel makes about then if the price is always kept low, but people aspire to have a better income, that is a real tension that exists. So in a way, this is how by running a hawker center, we try and strike that balance. We keep our rent as affordable as possible. So for example, the hawker centers are built entirely on government's costs.
Right.
We don't
just
recover the
money.
cost from the hawkers.
Yeah.
We don't price our rent to say, because I spend X million dollars building this hawker center, therefore I want to recover costs in 5 years, I'll charge you a rent of this amount. No. We actually make sure that first of all, there's no base rent. That's why even $1 you can get it if the bid is successful. We are not here to use the bidding system to actually get recovery of cost, right? We are actually using it more to select who can get the store.
Yeah.
It's a selection mechanism, awarding mechanism, not so much of a cost recovery mechanism. Then by aggregating them together and by putting, say, an operator, socially conscious enterprise operator who can leverage his network, his economy of scale, he can hopefully bring in cheaper utilities, cheaper services so that it actually helps keep the hawker's cost down.
Right.
And that's how you try and help the hawker to be able to sell affordable food to Singaporeans while earning a fair and decent income. Because otherwise, if you leave to market forces, the prices cannot be like that because they will have to factor in the rent that is maybe many times more.
Yeah.
So the price will have to go up a lot more. They will have no economy of scale operating on their own individual little store. They will then have to contract their own dishwasher, whatever thing, right? And that will cost a lot more as well.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how we created the ecosystem to try and strike that balance.
Right.
But over time, the reality is that because inflation has caused food prices to go up.
Yeah.
Just like all of us as normal consumers, you go to supermarket, you go to the market and buy your raw food, you see prices go up because all the food import come from everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Everywhere in the world has a high inflation cost. So naturally raw food will have to go up as well. So the hawker is not spared from that. They also buy the same chicken, the same eggs that all of us buy from our markets, right? To cook. So that means their price will have to make some adjustment. And I think for consumers, I think it's whether we value that food that they cook for us. To say, look, it need not be the same price as a ramen of $15 per bowl, but where in between do we think we want to honor them for the kind of trade craft that they have, for the hours they put in, for retaining the recipe that they studiously refine over generations.
Exactly.
So it's where we value those as consumers, put a price in between.
Okay, I got a dumbass question, right? I don't know. I've never really looked at this parliament motion thing, right? What is a motion? I feel like
It sounds like a paragraph that you all just say.
like it wasn't that the parliament's job to begin with. Like because I look at the motion, then it was amended. Then amended, we add a bit of words on it. Right?
We had 3 words.
No lah.
Okay,
the phrasing a bit
okay.
different. The phrasing very different. I can see why it made it better. What's the point of it? Like. Isn't the government supposed to be taking care of everybody to begin with?
But you see, when we amended the motion, we added part of the statement right at the back to ensure that our
Continuous
hawkers
review,
to ensure that our hawkers earn a fair and sustainable income. I think if you something like that, because we felt that the original motion emphasizes more on the policy, but not on making sure the hawkers themselves have a fair and sustainable income.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because to me, I think that is key because the hawker center is an infrastructure. Without the people operating it, without the hawkers themselves, there's no life, no spirit, no culture. But how do you keep that culture alive? You must make sure the people who's actually holding the baton, the ones who's actually owns the recipe and cooking and frying every day, has to have a sustainable way of making a living.
Yeah.
They ought to be paid enough, earn enough. Otherwise, you cannot attract the next Singaporean generations to come in. Then the culture will just fizzle out over time.
Right.
So we felt that for the motion to work, the emphasis on the hawkers earning a sustainable and viable income is an important aspect in that motion.
Okay, there's quite a lot of context. Because when you read the news article, it's like, oh, you guys discussed this for 5 hours to agree on a paragraph. But now there's a lot more context. So, okay.
You know what I mean? And then the paragraph is like, you mean we weren't doing that?
Yeah. Isn't this a given? Okay.
Let's submit some motions for the company.
That's right. Yeah. I want to
Like
submit a
from
motion
now on,
tomorrow.
let's make profit. You know what I mean? Like, you're not making profit. I want to jump to some proposals that were brought up in a recent debate from PSP. I'd like to know from a policy point of view, if it's a good idea, then it's a good idea, correct? But I'd like to know what are the wider considerations, because in theory, when I look at it, I feel like, yeah, okay, sounds about right. Like,
Sounds possible.
yeah, you might say, please tell me what I don't see, right? So the first one is to create a central procurement to kind of suppress costs for economies of scale.
Oh.
Sounds good.
That is already also proposed, and actually some of the hawker centers have tried that, but the take-up
it's
is
been
very
done
poor. Take-up is very poor. The hawkers themselves are reluctant to end up into a centralized procurement type of system.
Why?
Because most of the hawkers, like he gets his juhu from somewhere, because it cannot be my juhu must be more special than the next guy.
But you got test or not? You got test maybe the cheaper value.
No.
Because some of them have either they have a relationship with a particular supplier, years of relationship, so they want to go back to the same one for consistency of their product, right? Or they actually think that they want to use a unique particular ingredient. So some of them are reluctant to then go into that central procurement thing because they feel that makes them homogenized. It's no longer the same. It's no longer unique. Therefore, I think if hawkers have this desire, some of the operators are prepared to do so. In fact, some of the merchant associations like Chinatown, you can organize. There's actually nothing to stop them.
Okay.
But we have experimented and tried before, but the take-up has been poor. Maybe in a different time point, it may resurrect itself again.
Wow, but I feel it's so sad because if you're a single hawker, right, your bargaining power to that supplier is so low compared to like the bigger chains or whatever. Like if there's a shortage of like an ingredient, right, you lose out immediately. But I can understand the reason why they want to have that edge.
So and this is a tough one that I wanted to bring up, right? And this is not a proposal. This was a statement made by NCMP, right? And he said this, and I didn't get it because there was no follow-up to the article, which is the current plight of our hawkers is at least partly due to policies laid down by the government.
Ooh. Depends on what plight he's talking about.
Yeah, what's he talking about? What plight are we? What plight is it, Cornelius? You think, right? What do you think were the policies that caused it?
I feel that the hawkers right now, they are very happy with their lives.
Really or not?
Generally.
That's crazy.
So if they are not happy, generally if they're not happy, they will not be able to make ends meet at home. And then that's when stores will start to close. And then you start to notice that the hawker center starts to become vacant, right? However, this is not what we are seeing.
Okay.
What we are seeing is that hawkers are still coming day after day, doing what they love, taking home what they deserve, earning after the whole entire day. And they can still go on holidays. They can still have fun. They can. They are enjoying their life.
It's like some secret shit behind margin, but he like trying not to show us with their reach.
That's right. He had to take out his ball before he came here.
No. So it's really hawker trade is a way of life.
Wait.
Yeah.
So where do you think this is coming from?
Is there no problem?
Yeah, where do you think this is coming from? Like it's easy to see in Parliament when we talk about when we think about hawkers and we think about the auntie uncle, they're very old, right? Then like we say when you tell me they're very poor thing, then I'm like, okay lah, probably.
So unless you're talking about another group of hawkers who are more business oriented and they look at business from a pure business point of view with probably dividend to share with some shareholders and stuff like that. Then from their business point of view, then perhaps they will then look at profits from the community point of view. For hawker trade is more of a 人情味 thing.
So what you're saying is that if you have adopted hawker as like a vocation, almost like a life mission, right, then it's really perfectly fine.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. Even now, you see the age of hawkers are getting older, but they are still continuing.
Yeah,
because this is their destiny. This is our destiny as hawkers. So if it is not sustainable, then why are they able to continue at this stage, at this age? So
what
for
happens,
me,
if the 3-year term, then halfway I'm like, I cannot.
Then they can always surrender the store back to NEA. Then we put it up for retender again. We can put it up for retender again.
There is no, you have to pay 3 years worth of lease.
I know we don't like collect lease up front for a long time.
It's so friendly.
Yes.
Okay.
Just 1 month, you just let the NEA officer
I lose my deposit there.
Yeah.
Yes.
But let me maybe just frame it this way, that hawkers do face pressures in trying to run their trade. We want to make sure they have a decent income so that good enough that continue to attract the next generation to come in, but able to keep their costs in an affordable way for Singaporeans to find that the food is still largely affordable. Yeah. But we cannot say it's cheap, because actually cheap connotates the fact that they are actually going below margins, and that's quite difficult for hawkers. I think the correct word would be more like affordable, so that they earn a fair income. Not exorbitant, but enough not just to sustain them, but not to be lagging too far behind the rest of Singaporeans. So there are real challenges. What government tries to do is where we can, where it's up to us, we're trying to manage the cost as much as possible. But actually as a social compact, consumers must also come in and say, are they prepared to do more? You talk to some of the hawkers, they will always lament. If people can pay $15 for ramen, why not pay more for my thing? If they can pay $5-6 for Starbucks, why my kopi gao kosong cannot be a little bit more?
Exactly.
So in a way, it's a conversation that I think as consumers, as Singaporeans, we all ought to have to decide where we want to put our money, where we think we are valuing it.
But isn't that an association problem? Like, can't you fix it? Like, I mean, okay, sorry, I try not to sound so aggressive. Yeah. Like, isn't it a matter of, guys, let's all raise by 20%? Like, because I know I cannot raise my wanton mee by $2 like that. Like, people get pissed off, then they will just go to the stall beside me, right? But if everybody plus two?
You put it the other way, it's the same question that you were framing just now from the NCMP. Ask yourself, if today government's NEA hawker policy is not present, we just let market forces do its work. Will they be better off or will they be worse off? Well, our policies cannot guarantee that everything will be perfect for them, take away all the pressures 100%, because some of the pressures are external to government. I cannot force consumers to pay more, even though hawkers wish they could have paid more for their noodle or their coffee. But within what we can, we manage the cost in a sustainable way. We try and aggregate them so that actually we strike the balance between what the consumer want and what the hawkers want. Without us, I'm not sure it will purely be better. Because if so, as Cornelius said, if the free market is better, many of these hawkers shouldn't be tendering my store. They should be going to work in a food court. They should be going to a private coffee shop. They know that this is an affordable way to get into the F&B sector. As a first step in, low threshold of entry, low barrier, operate, gain some experience. If they do better, they can open a franchise elsewhere. They can enter into the larger F&B space.
Right.
They can spin off into manufacturing youtiao to be frozen and sold out. Make juhe to actually export elsewhere. So there are options that hawkers can use, and we want to be the low barrier entry option for them.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think you rightly pointed out earlier that it is a society issue, I think. I think if we are all more understanding, if a hawker wants to increase prices by 20 cents or 30 cents and understand that there are so many pressures on them, if we already feel the pinch when we go to the supermarket, they will obviously feel the pinch, then I think we'll be a lot better off.
But this is a difficult conversation to have at this juncture because it's a high inflation environment.
Yeah.
All of us as consumers, men on the street, are also feeling the pressure of the high cost of living. Right? So what government does is then we cannot ask hawkers to be the subsidizer of food.
Of course not.
Neither can we tell people, therefore, stop eating because things are too expensive, so just cook at home. What do? We offer CDC vouchers. We put cash on a regular basis through our assurance package into the hands of Singaporeans so that with those vouchers, they now actually have cash to spend at our hawker centre. So in some way, we put cash into the hands of our people who needs them to overcome cost of living. On the other hand, those cash actually flow back to our hawkers.
Exactly.
And in that way, we try to manage the cost of living pressure for both the hawkers and the consumers.
Right.
And trying to tide them over this period. But the longer term thing is that we must then price, if we ask ourselves, we really value hawkers, then what is the price we're willing to pay to keep their trade sustainable? The key thing is to encourage the next generation to see this as viable and enter.
Or the second proposal, which is to change from the current bidding model to $500 flat or 3% of GTO, or like which is revenue, right?
Gross turnover.
Whichever is higher. On paper, that sounds good because we see the government's not trying to recover cost, right? What are the other implications?
So on the surface, it sounds like it's a reasonable thing to do. If you don't have much gross turnover, then you pay lesser rent because I charge you based on percentage of your gross turnover. And in fact, this model has been used. It's not within our NEA hawker centre.
Right.
If you've been to some food courts, you will know that there are those that you go there, you have to queue up first, go and buy a store value card. Remember?
Yeah.
You say the cashier will ask you how much you want to top up inside. You put $10 first.
I hated it.
Then you go to each of the individual stores. You can only use that card to buy. You cannot do a cash transaction with the hawker.
Yeah.
Then after you finish eating, you must go to that cashier again, and based on what is left in the card, they refund it to you.
Yeah.
Right?
So inconvenient.
Because to do a gross turnover, the operator must then know how each store is getting in terms of sales.
Yeah.
So it means two things. One, the store must each have a point of sale system.
Yeah.
Two, you cannot receive cash from your customer anymore.
Yeah.
Three, for the consumer, you have to do this extra 2 steps of first go and get the card.
Yeah.
Swipe ready before you finish eating and before you walk off, you have to go there and settle the bill with the cashier again, right? So there are inconveniences and there are challenges, but it's been done before at food court. So actually, if hawker centers want want to do that. It's not impossible. But I'm not sure whether this is something that the broad consumers would want, because today it's so convenient to go to a hawker center.
Yeah.
And it's easy for hawkers to get cash flow.
Yeah.
Whereas in the GTO model that therefore requires a point of sale system, hawkers may not get the money immediately on that day. They will have to wait for whatever the operators tally to say end of month, I give you back the money. So implementation will have some challenges and some inconveniences, both consumer and hawkers must
Are we
be
also
prepared for,
mindful that many of these hawker centers are built with taxpayers' money? And so we also cannot just subsidize hawkers and be fair to the rest of Singapore also.
Well, to some extent, we are already subsidizing our hawkers because we built the thing without cost recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah, and most of these are therefore operated at governments, some degree of subsidies given already.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to jump to the third proposal, which is to allow stores to hire one work permit holder. Sounds fair enough.
Again, not inconceivable because it's about whether we want to keep the nature of hawker centers. Because one of the characteristics of a hawker center is that the hawkers themselves run the stores. On the other hand, if you allow them to hire, say, foreign workers, the look and feel of the hawker center may change drastically, because then it will become a lot more of the workers actually manning the store rather than the original hawkers themselves. Not impossible, but it's a question of what we want.
Yeah.
Right?
Like
This is
the
what you
2010
already see in
outrage.
food courts, for example. Right? So as a half step, we think it's easier for us to say, look, to maintain the look and feel, keep the Singaporeanness of this whole hawker culture, we liberalize it to allow long-term visit pass holders who have a nexus with a Singaporean family, because they got long-term pass because they are either a spouse
Spouses?
or a relative of a Singaporean.
okay.
So they could be a pool of people that can help the hawkers to relieve their manpower needs without opening it fully to say all forms of foreign labor comes in. Otherwise, you get Panda Express problem.
Yeah. But orange chicken is not bad.
Sure, but Panda Express and the food courts won't be inscribed UNESCO World Heritage. So it is a bit of a trade-off. How we want to defend our culture and keep the authenticity. That's the key word, the authenticity
Now, how
of
do
it.
we know what Singaporeans want? Because to a certain extent, okay, to me, if you ask me what hawker culture is, right? Hawker culture is the definition of Singapore culture. Because Singaporean want cheap fast food. Hawker is cheap fast food. So to me, that is the mirror of what Singaporean want, right? But to a certain extent, I feel like if you corner some Singaporeans, especially if cost of living is a problem for them, which many people face, and then they're like, you know what? I just want cheap fast.
If you had to decide between cheap fast or having a Singaporean to talk to at the hawker center.
No need good, you know?
Right.
How do we know where are we at as a country?
So
for
some of
government to
this,
decide?
the society, our expectations will evolve over time. And at some point, if society feels that that's what they want, then the reality is that actually the hawker culture would reflect that you will die a natural death. That means Singaporeans won't enter this trade. They would say, let's just outsource it to someone to do. And Singaporeans are prepared to accept that. Somehow society would start to evolve and things will move that way naturally.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether we're at the right time point at this point in time to do so. I do hope that by doing this thing, we can get the formula right. More Singaporeans will continue to come in rather than for us to say, let's just depend on foreign workers to now cook our char kway teow, fry our chai tau kueh, you know. So it's a balance we ought to strike, and I'm not sure society is ready for that to be changed.
So we've come to the end of the episode. I'd like to thank SMS Dr. Ko, Po Kun, and Cornelius for joining us on this episode.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining
And
us.
if you have not already, please subscribe to keep up with our cost of living series, and please support the hawkers of Singapore. Bye-bye. Cornelius, I heard you brought some food.
Yes, I brought.
You want to share?
Yeah, sure.
Hey,
Yeah, that's the
hey, best episode ever. Wow. Okay,
How y'all fry this in the store?
We baked this in the store.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's baked.
Yes, it's baked.
Wow, the studio is going to smell really great
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
It's just in time for Chinese New Year.
Exactly.
Wow, really? I can try. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, this one,
Yes, crack
this
it.
one is my favorite.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Together. No
I
problem.
hope I cannot.
Yeah, you can.
I'm on a 12-week body transformation program, guys.
Hey, but just take a small one.
You can bake it in the store.
Yeah,
Do a
we
big
do
one.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Dr. Ko likes it a lot, so I'm going to put it closer to him.